Hi, and thank you for joining me for another short talk. And friends, tonight I want to talk to you about the Matthew Kelly Boca Raton Synagogue charade that we just heard a few weeks ago came to an end mainly because the speaker, who was invited to speak by the name of Matthew Kelly, refused to show up because, as he said, he was actually receiving phone calls from Jews, not just insulting him, but even physically threatening him if he showed up to speak. So this is why tonight I want to speak to you about this whole Matthew Kelly ordeal, to see if by knowing what actually happened, we could then make a more educated decision on whether we either agree or disagree with how things transpired. So, what actually happened? Well, the Boca Raton Synagogue invited a motivational speaker by the name of Matthew Kelly to speak about his new book, which was, by the way, on a completely secular subject. Also, this talk wasn't being given in the sanctuary, but in the social hall. Now, this today, friends, is common practice. Not to mention that the Boca Raton Synagogue is so large that it acts like a Jewish community center of sorts. And just like most JCCs, they invite non-Jewish individuals to speak and even give classes throughout the year. And also, like normative JCCs, the individuals they invite cannot in any way teach or espouse ideas contrary to normative Judaism. Well, at least that's the Boca Raton Synagogue's policy, because sometimes JCCs do what they want. But regardless, the Boca Raton Synagogue made these restrictions explicitly clear to Mr. Kelly, who, as the professional he is, had no problems with it. Not to mention that Matthew Kelly is a world-renowned speaker, and anyone curious about his talks could just watch many of them on YouTube to see if there he secretly tries to proselytize his Jewish audience, which, of course, he's never done in the past. But this was not enough for them. And again, another point that many who so viciously attacked both Kelly and the Boca Raton Synagogue seem to have missed was, again, that this talk was not taking place in the sanctuary. Not that halakhically having the talk in the sanctuary would be prohibited, but again, he was going to speak in the social hall portion of the synagogue. No different than any other individual who has ever spoken there before, again, on a secular subject. However, there is one exception, friends, and the exception is that Matthew Kelly professes to be a devout Catholic. In other words, in his personal life, he deeply believes in Catholicism, which is ultimately what all the noise was about. Now, I wonder, where were the protesters when secular left-wing individuals have spoken there in the past? I mean, are they honestly about to tell us that the epidemic in the Jewish world is Jews losing their brethren to Christianity over leftism? Really, friends, because this is how the protest was portrayed, in some way insinuating that if you were not against Matthew Kelly, the Matthew Kelly event, you in some way were not for keeping Jews Jewish. Now, don't get me wrong, if for some reason there was a high probability that a missionary would in some way try to slip arguments for another religion into the talk, I would also have protested the event. In other words, if Michael Brown or some other evangelical missionary who I know targets Jews for conversions, if they were the ones speaking, friends, for sure I would have been protesting as well. However, the reason I did not protest and the reason I'm making this video in the first place is because we are not properly picking our battles here. Why? Because when do Catholics target Jews for conversion? Honestly, what, the Inquisition? That was actually to weed out fake converts from Christianity, not to convert Jews to Christianity. Not to mention that it was Rabbi Mizrahi, one of the main instigators of this protest, who himself invited a Christian missionary into the sanctuary of a synagogue, giving him full permission to try to convince him and the audience that Jesus is the Messiah during a debate. And why weren't people angry then? What if the missionary would have won the debate? Am I missing something here, my friends? Friends, it sounds like the opposition to this event was more fueled by a hatred of Christians and the leadership at BRS than a love for Jews and intellectual honesty. Actually, it seems that attacking Christians has become a favorite pastime of uneventful American Jewish life. Bored with nothing to fight, so they just create things to fight. Having the chutzpah to even call Mr. Kelly an anti-Semite, or even Rabbi Goldberg a fake rabbi. Come on, friends. Look, I understand that one point that the protesters tried to make to get this event canceled is the fact that Mr. Kelly claims to be a proud Catholic missionary. Now, this is true. Mr. Kelly does claim to be a Catholic missionary in his free time. However, anyone involved in counter-missionary apologetics could tell you that A Catholic missionary should never be confused with an evangelical missionary, which is exactly what the protesters have done. In other words, the Catholic mission is to offer support for existing Catholics and existing Catholic causes, right? Whether it's building hospitals, hospice care, strengthening the faith of existing Catholics in poor countries and cities, but never targeting individuals of other faiths for conversion, especially Jews. Not to mention that once the story reached the ears of the Israeli rabbis, who really know nothing about what's going on in America and the counter-missionary world or the missionary world, they also ended up condemning, obviously, the Boca Raton Synagogue, and really rephrased the whole narrative to the point that it didn't resemble what actually took place or what was going to take place, right? They were saying South Florida Synagogue invites head evangelical missionary to proselytize its congregations. So, of course, the anti-Kelly movement picked up steam because it was predicated on a lie. I mean, could you imagine if Christian organizations or just plain non-Jewish institutions would refuse to let a Jew speak just because he or she privately or publicly was devoutly Jewish? You don't think that Michael Medved, Ben Shapiro, Dennis Prager ever speaks to non-Jews in church halls and on religious issues like the importance of the Ten Commandments or the importance of the State of Israel? But if you're thinking, oh, but we don't proselytize, well, Catholics don't proselytize either. And I assure you that there are more Catholics who become Jewish yearly than Jews become Catholic. Friends, are you beginning to realize how stupid it was to support such a protest? And if the idea is that we as Jews have nothing to learn from non-Jews, then all of us should pull our children out of virtually every Haredi school in the country because, as you know, they typically hire non-Jews to teach subjects like science, math, English, etc. I mean, how about the university? Honestly, do you think that Chazal would have endorsed this primitive idea that we have nothing to learn from non-Jews when Chazal themselves teach Yesh Chochma Bagoyim Tamin? Right? That there is wisdom among the nations. There just isn't Torah among the nations. However, the main reason used by these rabbis to condemn the event, and the speaker as well, is by labeling him a min, a sectarian, and resurrecting, no pun intended, resurrecting the halachot with how to deal with minim. Now, if this is not the biggest giveaway that this issue was not properly thought out, friends, I'm not sure what is. Look, although it is true that Ovdei Avodah Zarah, that idolaters according to halakha are considered minim, it is also true that the term min only applies if the individual is a Jew and not if the individual is a non-Jew. Now, let me clarify this fact a little further because I really don't want to lose you here. Friends, the term min, or any of the halachot dealing with minut, again, literally sectarianism in Judaism, were only codified towards the end of Bayit Sheni. In other words, toward the end of the Second Temple, when Jewish sectarian groups were running wild, mainly because Jewish leadership was in disarray. So we see Chazal not just developing halachot with how to deal with minim, but even going as far as instituting the 19th benediction of the Amidah, known as Birkat HaMinim, the famous Laminim Velamalshinim portion of the Amidah. But again, this was only for Jews, not Goyim, mainly because every non-Jew of that time and before was already a pagan, right? He was already what we call Ovdei Kochavim Umazalot, who at that time were the occupiers of Eretz Yisrael, and were the hosts whenever and wherever the Almighty sent us during Galut. I mean, even the Navi tells us regarding when we go into Galut, in the midst of pagans, to seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you, and to even pray to Hashem for it, because if it prospers, you will prosper. In other words, we are instructed to help build up societies that for sure, in the time of Yirmiyahu, were all idolaters. Now, what's the actual halakha? Friends, it's pretty clear. Jewish minim are to be pushed away, right? Their lost objects are not to be returned. We're not to mourn when they die. We don't prolong their lives. They lose their chelik in Olam Haba. Why? Because they know better. Besides that, history teaches that Chazal actually got along with minim exceptionally well compared to the other groups, the Apikorsim and Kofrim. However, the halakha is different for Goyim. No, friends, non-Jews, even idolaters outside of the land were allowed to work with, learn non-Torah issues from it, even have fellowship alongside, but not in any way are we allowed to endorse their idolatrous practice, not to even sell them items that they may later use for avodah zarah. Which is why, al pi halakha, a goy cannot be a min, because you could not survive in galut with these halachot applying to the host of your countries. And again, the reason I'm mentioning this is because the notion and status of minim is the term they used in why Mr. Kelly himself was not acceptable. And again, these were the sources they used in urging Jews to stay away, right? Which only applied to Jewish minim, but they failed to mention that. So friends, Mr. Kelly does not fit the role of a min, a mummer, an apokos, or any inappropriate status these rabbis want to apply to him. And it's really that simple. No need to act like the world's coming to an end, and for sure there is no need to straight out lie about what was actually going on. Actually, the way the story was retold among the Israeli rabbis was already bordering on rechilut, not to mention crying wolf. And honestly, I really wonder why these rabbis don't get as appalled when an atheist speaks in front of Jews. I mean, isn't kefirah, according to halakha, worse than avodah zarah? Truthfully, my friends, I think Mr. Kelly deserves an apology, and we as Jews have to think how this looks and how it makes Jews look to our hosting countries, that its citizens are not welcome to even address our fellow constituents in a social hall, strictly due to their personal views or their ethnicity, when in the same social hall they have welcomed many ethnic Jews who had less in common with the congregation than Mr. Kelly had. Now again, if it was an individual who targeted Jews for conversion, I would agree, honestly. But the most I saw accusing him of any type of missionary activity, actual evangelical missionary activity towards Jews, was a testimonial on a Catholic website that was affiliated with Mr. Kelly, where a former Jew wrote a testimonial on why he converted to Catholicism. And he never mentioned being targeted for conversion, that it was just a decision he made. Friends, I'm not giving this lecture because of Mishum Eva or Darche Shalom, but because we have become arrogant and have become ungrateful of the peace we enjoy among those who tolerate and even support our way of life, even when they leave us alone like Catholics do. This is why I'm against this whole charade. Friends, for more information about everything Jewish, please visit TorahJudaism.org. Thank you.